You know, some people don't consider this a mainline Sonic game, and to me, that is absolutely bizarre. I mean, just look at it. This is clearly very much continuing off of the things that the adventure games and Heroes were doing. Yes, it does do a number of things different and kind of weird compared to the other Sonic games. I don't really think it matters that much that, like, you don't play as Sonic. It's the gameplay and game design that determines whether or not this is a mainline Sonic game, and from my perspective, it absolutely is, so we're gonna talk about it. Version recommendation is easy, just play Shadow the Hedgehog on Dolphin. Starting with controls and physics, I think Shadow the Hedgehog actually feels really good. This game is clearly built right on top of the engine and tools that they used to make Heroes, so a lot of things are very similar to that game. But they have adjusted a number of things, primarily the movement. I think they probably heard all the complaints about Sonic Heroes being a bit too slippery and twitchy, and so they've adjusted how things work in Shadow the Hedgehog in terms of just moving around, in a way that I actually quite like. For one, they actually decided to increase your default speed even more than it was in Sonic Heroes, which is honestly kind of a baffling choice, because look at how insanely fast you can go in this game. It's kind of ridiculous. The biggest change that they've made to the general controls of Shadow the Hedgehog is that they have finally addressed that thing that I complained about way back in my Sonic Adventure video, about the ability for you to just redirect your momentum instantaneously without losing almost any of your speed. That is no longer the case here in Shadow the Hedgehog, because as you increase in speed, your turn radius does actually increase. You can no longer just instantaneously do a 180 and start running in the opposite direction, basically at full speed. This has resulted in the game getting kind of opposite criticism, though, that the game kind of feels a little bit unresponsive to people and a little slippery in its own way. But I think once you get used to it, Shadow the Hedgehog feels very good. When you're moving at high speed, you no longer have the problem of instantly veering off into unintended directions. Now you can very precisely maneuver yourself while moving very fast and weave through obstacles very well, because now you just make slight adjustments in your current direction rather than veering off 90 degrees like all the previous games. And to me, this is actually a lot closer to how the original 2D Sonic games would feel if they were in 3D, because now you actually have a genuine feeling of momentum. You cannot just redirect all this speed instantaneously. You have to work with it. As you get faster, it becomes harder to turn. I quite like it, and you do still have the option to use jumping to create air drag and slow yourself down that way. And when you're moving at slower speeds in this game, I think it controls extremely well. You have a very tight turn radius, and you can control yourself very well for all kinds of platforming. The only thing that I find weird about this game's physics and controls in general is how you can now just instantly stop on a dime just by going neutral on the movement stick. Like, that is so wrong for how Sonic is supposed to go. Normally, in all the other games, you would slow down to a stop, but it does enable for some very precise control, so I'm not really going to complain about it too much. Honestly, overall, I would say that Shadow the Hedgehog might even be the best feeling and controlling of any of these 3D games so far. Sonic Adventure 1 felt great, for sure. It was incredibly precise, but it was almost too good. You almost had too good of control in that game. Here, I feel like you have a really good balance between precise platforming and good control while moving at high speed, once you get a feel for things. As far as moveset goes, you have a lot of the same things that you've had in all the other 3D Sonic games so far: homing attack, light speed dash. The spin dash is back in this game, but it functions differently than it has in any of the other 3D Sonic games. You can no longer charge a spin dash while moving. If you try to do that, then you're just going to end up getting this, like, slide kick move, which means the only way you're going to get spin dashes in this game is if you do it from a standstill, just like the classic games, which actually is something I like. As much as I enjoy spam dashing and how busted and OP it is, I definitely think I prefer something a little bit more controlled that actually gives you choices to make as a player, because now I can actually think about whether or not I want to come to a complete stop to spin dash. Like, it feels very similar to how it did in the 2D Sonic games, and I very much like that. And of course, you can still use it for spin dash jumping great distances and stuff, but again, it's not as busted as it was in Sonic Adventure. Now, obviously, all that team stuff from Heroes is out the window, because this is Shadow the Hedgehog, so you only play as Shadow. And of course now we have to talk about the game's big gimmick, which is guns, weapons, combat. That's a whole big thing now here in Shadow the Hedgehog. And honestly, I just have to say right off the bat, I really do not care about Shadow using guns. Like, yeah, it's dumb and stupid and edgy and ridiculous and goofy and all that crap that you can say, but I really honestly don't care. From a game design perspective, I think the guns are implemented fairly well into the gameplay, and I think they work. You can get weapons off of taking them off of dead enemies, or you can find them in crates that you can bust open, and there's lots of different types of weapons you can find in the game. There's a couple of melee weapons you can use, but primarily, of course, the big deal is guns. And there's a couple of different varieties of guns. Obviously, you have like semi-automatic weapons, fully automatic weapons, and some weirder weapons available, like the weird alien weapons that have all kinds of weird effects, and you have things like rocket launchers and lock-on lasers and all kinds of weapons like that. But really, honestly, in terms of using the weapons, it doesn't really make that much of a difference, because most of the weapons functionally are used in the exact same way, because this game has a very generous auto lock-on. You don't have to aim the weapons at all, so if you just put enemies in front of you and hit the fire button, then Shadow's automatically going to shoot at things with incredibly high accuracy, so most of the weapons end up feeling the same. So while weapon variety doesn't matter, just having a gun at all is definitely very nice in this game, primarily because it lets you take out enemies without having to basically engage with them in any way. You can fire guns while moving or jumping or doing anything you can do normally, and they don't hinder your speed whatsoever, so it's very easy to just take out enemies very nonchalantly and easily by just putting them in front of you and holding or repeatedly pressing the fire button. And this is basically what most of the combat ends up boiling down to. There's not a whole lot in terms of, like, strategy and depth to the combat in this game. If you don't have a gun, then there's basically two types of enemies. Enemies you can kill in a single attack, usually with a homing attack, obviously, or enemies that take multiple hits. And you can homing attack them repeatedly, but that's a bit slow. Or for bigger enemies with a lot of health, you have the option of just kind of repeatedly jumping into them, and that'll kill most enemies fairly quickly, but you do make yourself vulnerable to attacks that way. However, if you have a gun, you can kill basically anything in like 1 or 2 seconds. Nothing has a chance against you, which I guess you could criticize the game for having very shallow combat in that way, but I actually think this works in Shadow the Hedgehog's favor, because it means you don't really have to get bogged down in the combat very much. Once you get your hands on a gun, then you basically never have to stop moving forward because you can kill enemies so quickly. So it definitely keeps the speed and energy of this game up in terms of a Sonic platformer. The only real depth to be found in the combat, I would say, is with ammo management, because while there is a lot of guns around and a lot of ammo, because there are different weapon types, you won't always be able to find ammo for the specific weapon you're using, so there is a little bit of ammo management to be done to make sure that you save your ammo for the enemies that are going to take longer to kill, and not wasting ammo on the small fries. But it's not that much of a thing. It doesn't matter that much, but it's a little something. So overall, I would say that the guns work perfectly fine for Shadow the Hedgehog. Like, everybody makes fun of this game for how edgy and stupid it is for Shadow to use guns. But really, I think they work, and I don't think there's anything really wrong with the idea inherently with incorporating this type of gameplay into Shadow the Hedgehog. It makes this game feel unique to the other Sonic games, so I think it works. While we're talking about combat, I think we can address because they have been changed in this game a little bit in how they function compared to all the other Sonic games. Because now when you get hit, you don't drop all of them all at once. When you get hit in this game, you only lose 10, which actually is kind of a callback to Sonic Blast, because that's how it worked in that game. And considering how much more emphasis there is on enemies and combat in this game than most Sonic games, I think this works fairly well, because compared to most Sonic games, the enemies are more threatening here than any of the other games up to this point. I definitely took a lot more hits playing through Shadow the Hedgehog, and it also works because the whole idea of like holding onto your really only existed in the classic 2D Sonic games for the purpose of collecting Chaos Emeralds, but once they removed the whole special stage thing and having to collect 50 of them, there's really no reason for you to have to try so hard to keep all of your so there's really no reason to punish the player by having them lose all of them anymore. So rebalancing the system in this game, I actually think, is a fairly smart move, and the way they did it, I think it works, because now every 10 basically gives you an extra hit point, so you're kind of actually collecting things that fill up kind of a health bar, and of course you still have the option to recollect them after you get hit. This does, of course, mean that you can still just hold on to one and basically be unkillable, but other than that issue, I think this works fairly well. Another thing we need to talk about is grinding, which has been changed a bit for Shadow the Hedgehog. Finally, they have fixed rail switching. You now have an actual rail switching animation when you jump from rail to rail, and this guarantees that rail switching is going to work every single time. You no longer have to worry about rail switching being inconsistent. You can actually use it now, which is great and would make Shadow the Hedgehog have the best rail grinding of the series so far. But in my opinion, they actually messed it up in pretty much every other way, because first of all, they've removed balancing entirely from grinding, and I have no idea why. I thought that the balancing mechanic was a really good mechanic that added just an extra layer to the grinding and made it more fun. But also, the flipping into the crouch, they have totally messed up in this game compared to what it was in Sonic Heroes, because they've removed the cap in how fast you can accelerate from the flip. So now there's no reason to not just mash the flip as quickly as you can, and you can get up to such an insane speed on rails, so it just means that there's less depth to the rail grinding here. What the fuck? Why did they mess it up when they finally got the rail switching correctly? We could have had the best rail grinding in the entire series here. As it is, I still overall prefer Sonic Heroes' version of rail grinding. The only other thing to talk about in terms of Shadow's abilities in this game is his Chaos powers, because of course with this game being Shadow the Hedgehog, you want to take advantage of Shadow's unique attributes as a character, so they've implemented Chaos abilities that you can use for Shadow, with limitations. You have those meters in the top corners of the screen, your Dark meter and your Hero meter, and you fill those primarily killing enemies of certain factions. And once you fill one of those meters, then you get access to certain Chaos powers for a limited amount of time. Filling your Dark meter all the way will give you access to Chaos Blast, which is a big explosion you can do in an area around you that does a lot of damage to the surrounding enemies. And if you can fill your Hero meter all the way, then you get Chaos Control, which is a move that makes you just fly forward to a later part of the level, basically skipping a huge chunk of it. The thing about these two Chaos powers is that while on paper they seem kinda neat, they're not really, honestly, that useful. Like, Chaos Blast is kinda useful, I guess, but honestly, it's kind of trounced by the other effect you get once you fill up one of your Chaos meters, because if you don't use your Chaos powers, then you'll have it for a much longer period of time, which gives you access to the much stronger benefits, in my opinion, of having invincibility and infinite ammo until the meter drains. So honestly, I think you're better off just not using the Chaos Blast and just firing like crazy, and that'll probably kill all the enemies around you much more efficiently, because the Chaos Blast animation kind of takes a bit long. And Chaos Control is cool, and it's useful for trying to complete the level quickly, but a lot of times, because of the way this game is designed, you don't actually want to complete the level quickly, so most of the time you're actually better off not using it, and once again, just using the invincibility and infinite ammo. So they kind of really fucked up the design of the Chaos powers in this game. This is like Shadow's main thing, and he doesn't really get to take that much advantage of them. Instead, it just kind of ends up feeling like meters you can fill for a temporary power-up, which I guess that works in its own way. The only other thing I guess to talk about is vehicles. There are occasional instances in the game where you can hop into a vehicle for different types of gameplay. And you know that thing where everyone's always like, why do Sonic and friends get in vehicles when they're faster than the vehicles themselves? Well, Shadow the Hedgehog gives you the opportunity to really feel that for yourself, because while you can get in like cars and stuff, they are literally slower than you are on foot. So you can just go like, I don't want to get in the vehicle because it sucks. There are a couple of instances where vehicles can be useful when there's like hazardous floor that you can't walk on. And you also have this one vehicle, which is this walker thing that you can do a really high jump, which adds some variety into the platforming in the couple of instances when they use it. But other than that, the vehicles are pretty useless in Shadow the Hedgehog. There's also a couple of these instances where you have to get on these demon flying creatures and just fly forward, and there's not really a whole lot of gameplay here. You basically just avoid hazards, and some of them also let you shoot like lock-on missiles, but that's not very good either. So their attempt at incorporating vehicles into Shadow, I don't think it really worked out too well. Some of them are okay, but for the most part, yeah, not great. And as far as controlling Shadow goes, that's pretty much it for Shadow the Hedgehog. There's no alternate gameplay styles or anything like that. Not even different playable characters with different abilities or anything like that. This game is 100% Shadow the Hedgehog. The big thing that makes it different than all of the other Sonic games is that it has a much larger emphasis on mission-based game design. Like, clearly someone at Sonic Team was like, hey, you remember Team Chaotix and how fun that was in Sonic Heroes? Well, what if we made an entire game out of that kind of gameplay? Because while pretty much all of the levels in Shadow the Hedgehog can be played like any other Sonic game, just getting to the end of the level, you also have multiple missions that you can complete on all of the levels, and these are generally the same kind of things that were in Sonic Heroes with Team Chaotix. You either have to collect a certain number of a thing, or kill a certain number of enemies, or things like that. And once you complete one of the level's missions, then the level will just end right then and there, and this is where we get to the thing that really makes Shadow the Hedgehog stick out from all the other Sonic games, is the game's structure. Because Shadow the Hedgehog is not just a linear sequence of levels where you just play the level, complete the level, and move on to the next level, and you do that until you reach the end of the game. No, instead, Shadow the Hedgehog has branching levels where, depending on what mission you complete, you will go to a different level. This is to tie into the game's theming of whether or not Shadow is going to be a hero or a villain, or neither, and he's just going to go out for himself. And so whenever you complete a dark mission, it will move you up on the level select, but whenever you complete a hero mission, then it will move you downward on the level select. That kind of thing doesn't really have much basis on the gameplay, that's more for story purposes. But there are a couple of things that do get affected by the gameplay with this whole good and evil thing. As I said, you have the good and dark meters that are affected by things you do in the level, because in every level there will be a good mission to do and a dark mission to do, and along with that, most levels also have multiple enemy factions for you to go up against. There's not just generic Eggman robots as your only enemies in this game. This game now has 3 factions of enemies with different alignments. There is Gun, the human military, who are obviously the good guys, and then there is the Black Arms, the alien force introduced in Shadow the Hedgehog that are invading the Earth. And they are obviously the evil alignment enemies, and so killing Black Arms, killing the evil enemies, will fill up your hero meter, whereas if you kill Gun soldiers, then that will fill up your dark meter. And then the third faction is Eggman and his robots, and they kind of play in the middle. They basically become the opposite faction to whatever is the other faction in the level. If it's a level with Gun and Eggman, then Eggman will be the evil faction, but if it's a level with the Black Arms and Eggman, then Eggman will be considered the good faction, as I guess he is the lesser of two evils in that case. And they really go the extra mile with the idea of the different enemy factions in this game going to war with each other, because in instances where you have enemies from different factions near each other, they will actually go out of their way to attack each other. However, it doesn't matter whether you're doing good missions or dark missions or whatever, all of the factions are always hostile to Shadow no matter what you do, which kind of feels like a jip. But, you know, it's a video game. They're enemies, they're supposed to be a threat to you as the player primarily, so I guess it makes sense. One thing about this game and its whole mission structure of trying to encourage you to either do good or evil missions, the game does an incredibly poor job of initially communicating to you that this is even a thing. I will nearly guarantee you that every single person, when they first played Shadow the Hedgehog, they all did the neutral path, because getting to the end of the level is pretty much always the neutral mission in the level, and it won't push you toward good or evil, it'll just move you forward on the level select. So pretty much everyone's first playthrough of Shadow the Hedgehog looks like this. There's nothing in the game that does a good job of explicitly telling you that these missions even exist. The best they do is they have characters that you run into every level, and there's basically one character assigned to each mission. If you run into Sonic and his friends, then that will obviously be associated with the good mission, whereas you can also run into Doom's Eye, and he'll tell you about what the evil mission is, and of course Eggman will tell you about whatever his mission is, depending on what faction he ends up on. But the only way that they actually tell you about these missions is literally through character dialogue, and if you're not paying attention because you're busy playing a video game, it's very easy to miss what these characters are telling you and not pay attention to it. And there's like little things that come up on the HUD that tell you what the objective is and how much you've completed of it, but it's very easy for new players to not notice that or not know what the hell that's supposed to mean. I think most players probably only learn about the mission-based structure of Shadow the Hedgehog when they pause the game and see on the pause select screen that, oh, there's these 3 blocks here that each are a different mission, and you can scroll from one to the other, and it will tell you what the mission objective is. How about that? So with this mission-based and branching structure of Shadow the Hedgehog, the way that you play through the campaign of the game is also very different than any of the other Sonic games, because the game wants you to experience all of the different endings of it. As you can see, at the end of all of the final levels, there are those 2 little dots right there, and that is to show all of the final boss fights and endings of Shadow the Hedgehog. There's 10 endings in the game, based on which of the 2 final missions you do on the 5 final levels. And in order to fully complete the game and unlock the last story to do the last level and last boss, you have to get all 10 endings, which means having to do 10 playthroughs of Shadow the Hedgehog, where you do various different missions to get to the different final levels, and then do all of the missions on all the final levels, fighting all the different final bosses and getting all 10 endings. This is definitely the stuff that makes Shadow the Hedgehog feel very different than any of the other Sonic games, because you essentially have, instead of a campaign that you play through from the beginning to the end, you kind of have to do runs of Shadow the Hedgehog. You gotta do at least 10 runs, getting all the different endings, seeing different parts of the game. And one playthrough of the game takes about an hour, I would say, because you're only doing 6 levels. And so to me, Shadow the Hedgehog kind of comes off as a bit more of an arcadey Sonic game compared to any of the other ones, where you load it up, you do a run, and you see one part of the game, but then on a different run, you'll do a different mission and it'll send you on a totally different path and you'll see different parts of the game. Very much like how old school like beat-em-ups or light gun games would encourage you to come back for more replays. This does, of course, result in the potential for Shadow the Hedgehog to be a very repetitive game because, at best, you have to do the first level of the game 10 times, and then from there it branches into 3 different levels, but, again, at best, you have to do each of those levels 3 or 4 times. But honestly, I don't really think it's that much of a problem in Shadow the Hedgehog because of all the different missions you can do on the levels. Because, you gotta do the first level 10 times, and that does kind of suck, but the level is only like a minute and a half long if you just blaze through it to get to the end. And if you're doing the different missions, then it does add a little bit of extra variety to the gameplay, so it doesn't feel as repetitive. And then by the time you get to the second levels of the game, you have multiple missions across multiple levels, giving you plenty of stuff to play across most of the playthroughs. So I don't really think the repetition is too bad in Shadow the Hedgehog, because the different missions that you do end up altering the way that you play the game quite substantially. Because with this game's levels all having 2 to 3 missions on them, it has heavily impacted the way that the level design of Shadow the Hedgehog is constructed. While it does still have the split paths that you would find in typical Sonic games, it doesn't always do them in the traditional Sonic type of design of the multi-tiered paths, with the faster paths being more difficult, yada yada yada, all that stuff. Sometimes it does have level design like that, but a fair amount of the time, the level design of Shadow the Hedgehog has more branching paths depending on which mission you're doing. There's a lot of just straight-up intersections in this game where the character that you're following along with, depending on what mission they're associated with, will tell you, go right to do the good mission, or go left to do the dark mission. And thankfully, they don't put objectives of a single type on multiple paths going through an area. If you do the good mission, then you can just go on all of the good paths, and you will find everything you need to complete that mission. Whereas if you play through the level and do the dark mission, then you can stick to all of the dark paths, and that will have all of the objectives you need, and you won't have to backtrack. This makes it so that while you are playing the same level again, it doesn't feel as repetitive as it could have because you're going to totally different parts of the level most of the time. And if you're just doing the neutral mission, you're just trying to get to the end of the level, then you have the option of weaving back and forth between the good and evil paths of the level just to do whichever one will get you to the end fastest. So while one of this game's major criticisms is how you have to play through it 10 times, honestly, I really don't think it's that bad. I think a large amount of people's problem with having to play the game over and over is because they don't vary up their mission choices that much. When I was playing through Shadow the Hedgehog for this recording, I was doing different missions every single time I had the opportunity to. If I was ever playing a level that I had already played before, I would always go for one of the missions I hadn't played. And that resulted in very few times where I actually had to do the same mission over and over and over again. I was able to explore all of the levels across all my different playthroughs and do a lot of the missions, and it really didn't feel very repetitive at all. The only level that kind of felt like it was going on for a bit much was Westopolis, because you have to play it 10 times and there's only 3 missions there. But again, the level's only like a minute and a half, 2 minutes long. Even if you go for the hero or dark missions, they don't really take that much longer, so I wasn't even really bothered by it. I do think that 10 playthroughs is a bit egregious. I think maybe just requiring that you complete all of the final levels and get either of the 2 endings there probably would have been good enough. But as it is, as long as you go out of your way to vary up your playthrough, I don't find Shadow the Hedgehog to be that particularly repetitive of a game. I mean, you compare it to Sonic Heroes, and in that, you're playing through the same level 4 times, and in 3 of those times, you're doing the exact same thing, with some minor level design changes that don't ultimately make playing the level feel that different. And even the Chaotix playthrough with the missions don't really feel that different, because most of the objectives are still just along the same path that you end up playing with all the other characters. Here, depending on the level and what mission you're doing, you can get a rather varied experience, and I think it's pretty good. As far as the mission themselves go, I really don't find most of them to be that much of a problem at all. Similar to the Team Chaotix playthrough in Sonic Heroes, all of the mission objectives are fairly straightforward, and because the game has the pathways specifically set for the missions, they don't ever really make completing the objectives that difficult. They don't ever really hide the objectives or make it so that you have to explore the level very extensively to complete one of the missions. If you just go forward and you pay attention and make sure you go on all the paths you're supposed to go on for that mission, you'll complete them pretty easily first time through. And I don't find many of them to be very egregious. There are a couple of missions that can get kind of annoying. Like, for example, there's a lot of missions of, like, kill every enemy of the opposite faction. So for, like, the good mission, it would be kill all the black arms in the level. And if you end up missing 1 or 2 of the black arms, then you get to the end of the level and you're like, oh god, where are they? How did I miss them? Fortunately, they have added a system in the game where you can teleport from any checkpoint to any other checkpoint in the level. But this doesn't always help you very much, because if you missed something by the time you get to the end of the level, then obviously you don't know where it is. So you go to the list of checkpoints and you're like, I don't really have an idea of where the thing I missed was, because I don't know where it is. I wouldn't have missed it if I knew where it was. So which of these checkpoints should I go to? I don't know. So you end up kind of having to go back to the beginning anyway and play through the level over to find anything you missed. Sometimes you can get lucky and you'll see, oh, I missed a checkpoint, so there's probably a part of the level that I bypassed that I was supposed to go to for this mission, and you can just go to the checkpoint before it and find it, and then, hey, no problem. But sometimes you're just screwed, and you're like, where's the thing I missed? That's not anything particularly new for Shadow the Hedgehog. That was also a problem in the Team Chaotix missions in Sonic Heroes, but it can be more prevalent in this game because it has so many more missions to do with such a larger focus on missions. But generally, as I said, if you just pay attention, you won't have that much of a problem. Also, when you're doing missions and you have a certain mission selected, then there will be these little triangles above all of your mission objectives, highlighting the things that you need to interact with to complete the mission. So again, as long as you're diligent and pay attention, it's really hard to miss your mission objectives most of the time. The only problem with this is that they have the different characters for the different missions, like, strewn about the level, and running into them will override the mission you're currently doing. So if you want to keep tracking the mission you're trying to do, you have to go to the pause menu and reselect the mission you want to do. Kind of annoying. I wish that when you selected the mission, it would just stay on the mission. But it's not that huge of a problem. Which now with these missions, you can see how the Chaos Control ability is not really very useful, because you only are really going to fill up the Chaos Control ability when you're doing good missions, but if you're doing a good mission, then you usually have a mission objective that you actually want to complete. So if you actually use Chaos Control, then most of the time you're just going to end up flying past the thing you need to do, meaning you're just going to have to go back. So yeah, Chaos Control has some problems. Like, I feel like this probably should have been like the neutral Chaos Power, and they came up with something else for the good Chaos Power that would actually be useful. Because getting to the end of the level is the only instance in which Chaos Control is actually a worthwhile ability. But for 90% of the levels, that is the neutral mission, so you don't really have much reason to fill up your meter. And I think as far as platforming and stuff goes, the level design of Shadow the Hedgehog is fairly well done. It's pretty decent, typical Sonic stuff, very similar to the type of platforming that was in Sonic Heroes, and I think it works. There is an emphasis on combat, of course, with all the guns and stuff, but there's also a lot of areas specifically designated for whatever the mission objective is going to be for that level. Though, if I were to highlight one mission in particular that is fucking awful, then it would be the hero mission of Lost Impact. This is a very infamous mission as far as this game is concerned, because you have to kill all of the artificial chaos in this level. And the layout of this level is extremely confusing and hard to navigate, and it is very easy to get lost, have no idea where you are, no idea where you're supposed to go, and it's very easy to miss artificial chaos, and you'll have absolutely no idea where they are, where you're even supposed to be looking, and it can be an absolute nightmare. It is not at all uncommon for this mission to take some people over like an hour to complete because of how confusingly laid out it is, and this is absolutely a problem. Fortunately for me, I've played this game enough that I actually do kind of know this level's layout and can complete it without much issue, but that certainly does not excuse that this level is flat-out garbage. And one of the reasons in particular that this level is so problematic is because of how much it reuses its level assets. If you watched my Sonic Heroes video, then I talked about how much that game reuses whole chunks of levels within a single level, and then it has you replay that level multiple times. Shadow the Hedgehog takes that to the next fucking level, because not only does it have, like, environment types where it will use tile sets, like it'll have city levels, or it'll have arc levels, or it'll have Black Comet levels, and, you know, all of these levels use the same assets and, you know, remix them and create different level design with them. If that's all that there was here, I'd be like, hey, that's fine, that's just like the previous Sonic games, it's just like Zones, no issue. However, the problem is that they also do the thing that they did in Sonic Heroes, where they reuse entire chunks of the level, making it feel like you are playing the same level over and over again, because you look at this part of this level and this part of this level, and it's like, well, obviously this is just the same shit. But they go one step further because they also reuse these pieces within the level itself. So you have this piece getting used here, and also here in a different level, and then you throw that on top of the fact that you're playing a lot of these levels multiple times, and you are going through these same chunks of levels more times than you can possibly fucking imagine. Like Sonic Heroes, they do remix these pieces by having different level design, different enemies, different platforming, yada yada, but there's no denying that this is just reusing the same shit like a billion fucking times. But once again, I'm not too bothered by this incredibly aggressive level design reuse, because with all the different missions you do, it does feel kind of different when you play through these different things, because you're looking out for different things and going to different parts of the level. I guess next we can talk about boss fights, and in this game, boss fights are not terrible, I guess, but they're still not great. The bosses suffer from kind of the same problem that the general enemies do, which is that once you get your hands on a firearm, holy shit, you can melt these fuckers in a matter of seconds. Especially because all the bosses do have a faction associated with them, which means every time you attack them, you'll fill one of your meters. And if you can fill your meter during the boss fight while you have a gun and get access to infinite ammo, oh my god, the boss is done for. Which, I guess in a way, means that the bosses have a little bit more strategy here than they do in the other Sonic games. Like, they actually can go on for a decent amount of time, and you're actually trying to preserve ammo to make sure you have a gun for the time when you fill up your chaos meter. it kind of works. The bosses are, like, okay in this game, I would say, which by Sonic standards, and honestly for general 3D platformer standards, is not terrible at all. Though, of course, with the amount this game reuses all of its assets, you can bet that you fight all the different bosses multiple times, because there's only 6 actual bosses in this game. There's 3 mini-bosses, 1 for each faction, and 3 final bosses, 1 for each faction. And there are 10 endings in the game, meaning 10 final boss fights you have to do, which means fighting the same bosses many, many times, and that is also the case for the sub-bosses. You will fight them at different points depending on what levels you complete. And they try to vary them up a little bit by having them in different arenas with different weapons available, or sometimes no weapons at all, which I guess makes them a little bit different, but it really doesn't matter that much. Oh, and it's also worth mentioning that when you're in boss fights, obviously Chaos Control is not useful to you because you've got nowhere to fly to, so they change Chaos Control to instead be that you slow down time, which is, again, I guess cool on paper, but it's still better to just take advantage of the infinite ammo of this state and just melt the boss in a matter of seconds anyway. So after you've completed all 10 endings of the game, then you unlock the last story, which has one final level, which is just another Black Comet level, reusing all the assets from all the previous Black Comet levels again, and reusing the same assets within the same level again. So it's not particularly very good of a final level. And then, of course, you do the Super Shadow Final Boss minigame thing, and it's pretty much like all the other bosses in the game. It's kind of okay, I guess. And yeah, that's pretty much Shadow the Hedgehog. I mean, I don't know if you've been able to pick up on it by just how I've been talking about the game, but I don't think this game is terrible. Like, everybody makes fun of this game and says it's terrible, it broke it, it's shitty, and I really do not agree with those assessments at all. Honestly, I really feel like a big part of this game's negative criticism just comes from what it is. The fact that it's the edgy, dark game, and you play a Shadow with guns, and it's so fucking stupid. And then, as I said, the game does a poor job of teaching you about the mission structure, so most people don't even know it's there. And, you know, the missions sometimes can be a bit tedious if you miss things, which is a genuine problem. But for the most part, I don't think that this is a terrible game. I think it's actually fairly well designed. I think all the parts work and come together to make a game that is pretty regularly enjoyable, in my opinion, with only a couple of instances where it dips down and gets a little bit shitty. I actually think Shadow the Hedgehog is a pretty fun game. I really don't have any, massive fundamental problems with the game overall. Would this be my preference for a Sonic game? No, I would rather just a more traditional, straightforward Sonic game. But for what this game is trying to do, I think it works. I very much think we have another Sonic Blast situation here, where people load it up for 5 seconds and go, holy shit, this game is terrible, and then just dismiss it after that. But I am absolutely not here to rip a new one into Shadow the Hedgehog. I think the controls and physics are pretty good. The game feels really good to control, and it's honestly the most polished feeling of these games so far. The guns, while stupid, they work pretty well for the game and are integrated in a way that actually is fairly fun. The game can feel a bit repetitive with how much you have to replay it and how much it reuses level design, but I think having the variety of missions and all the different levels you can do on your different playthroughs makes it feel varied enough where I don't ever really get bored playing Shadow the Hedgehog. It does have other problems, but none that really are anything new for the Sonic games. It does still have that thing where all the levels are made of platforms and paths floating in the sky, so there's a lot of bottomless pits all over the place. And for some reason, they got rid of that thing where, after you get hit, you can jump in the air, giving you a chance to save yourself. Why the fuck did they get rid of that? That was a really good feature that they added in Sonic Adventure, and they took it out for this game. What the fuck? The one thing I would say is that while I personally don't find the game that repetitive, I do think it would have been better if they allowed you to just jump back to a level you've already played so you can do a different mission, and doing that mission would unlock the alternate levels and let you basically just continue from there, so you didn't have to do a full playthrough every time you wanted to do another path. But nope, they actually do make you do full playthroughs to unlock new levels and get new endings, which I think that was a bit of a mistake on their part, but as I said, I'm not too bothered by it as it is. And honestly, this is also, in my opinion, so far, the best Sonic game as far as 100% goes. Because to 100% Shadow the Hedgehog, you have to get an A rank on all of the missions on all of the levels, which, oh god, just hearing that, it gives me like war flashbacks of SA2 and Sonic Heroes and having to play these levels a billion goddamn times. However, there are two big things that make it not nearly that problematic in this game. First of which is the scoring system, because Shadow the Hedgehog has the same kind of scoring system that was in SA2 and Sonic Heroes, but it has one major difference, which is that for the first time, you can actually get A ranks in this game by completing the level as quickly as possible. This game actually gives you a serious time bonus at the end of the level, depending on how quickly you can complete it, and I was able to A rank almost every mission on my first playthrough just by trying to complete all of the missions as quickly as possible, which then leads into the other reason I don't think that getting all the A ranks is nearly as troublesome as the other Sonic games, because by the nature of Shadow the Hedgehog having you play through the game so many different times, I was able to get all of the A ranks on all of the missions on a good number of the levels, which is part of the reason that I was not bothered with doing the multiple playthroughs, because even if I got to a level that I'd already completed all the missions on, there was usually a pretty good chance that I might have missed the A rank on one or two of the missions, so if I came back to the level, I had the opportunity to try those missions again to try to get the A rank this time. When I was finished with just the normal game playthrough of Shadow the Hedgehog and I was starting to go for all the A ranks, this is what my level selection screen looked like. Any level that has a star on it means I got all the A ranks on that level. So by the time I had to start going out of my way to complete all the missions and do all the A ranks, half the game was already done, so it was a breeze doing the rest of the missions. And it wasn't even tedious at that point because a lot of the missions were fairly enjoyable, and they were missions that I hadn't gotten to do on my normal playthrough of the game. Because this entire game is actually mission-focused as opposed to the other 3D Sonic games, it's totally not a problem, in my opinion, to do all these missions, because instead of them just being complete the level in a certain time, or collect a certain number of or some shitty crap like that, you actually have the level being designed in a different way for all of the missions, making it not even feel any different to go for all the A ranks than it is to just play through the game. And because you can get all the A ranks by just completing the levels quickly, you don't have to extend out this playtime unnecessarily by stopping to kill all the enemies. You can just rush through it as fast as possible, and that'll get everything done. So getting all the A ranks in Shadow the Hedgehog was an absolute breeze, especially considering that you also unlock something once you complete the game. Because every time you get an ending, you unlock a new special weapon that you get in these special shadow crates, and these are weapons that are more powerful than the standard weapons that you can find throughout the levels and off of enemies. And once you complete the last story, you unlock the Shadow Cannon, and this thing will kill literally every single enemy in the game in a single hit. So by the time you complete the game and you have to go back for all the A ranks, you now have this super powerful weapon available to you that will just let you breeze through everything. So once you complete all the A ranks on all the levels in Shadow the Hedgehog, then you unlock Expert Mode, which is a similar thing to Very Hard Mode from Sonic Heroes, where you can play through all the levels again, but now they have remixed level design to make them harder. But Expert Mode is actually particularly cool in Shadow the Hedgehog because it completely restructures the game, and it removes the mission focus entirely, and now redesigns all the levels to be entirely focused on getting to the end of the level, more like a traditional Sonic game, and with that, it also gets rid of the split pathing with all the different missions and having to do multiple playthroughs. Now it just has all the levels in the game strung together in a single sequence where you play through it, just like you would a traditional Sonic game. And I think Expert Mode is super fun. Just like Very Hard Mode from Sonic Heroes, the level design gets really interesting and kind of weird and goofy in a way that I find really enjoyable. And now getting to play through this game like a more traditional Sonic game, I think it's really good. The only thing about 100%ing Shadow the Hedgehog that I don't like is collecting all the keys, because on every level is 5 keys hidden around somewhere, and once you get all 5 keys, you can use them to open these doors. And there's two problems with collecting the keys. One is collecting the keys themselves kind of sucks. I'm personally not really a fan of collectibles in linear levels, because generally it changes the way you have to play, where if you want to collect everything, then instead of being able to just go forward through the level and play through it as you normally would, you now have to slow down substantially and check every corner and every nook and cranny looking for absolutely everything. And even then, you're inevitably going to end up missing things in a lot of the levels, and then you're going to have to go through them over and over, trying to find where these keys are, and then eventually you're just going to get fucking frustrated and annoyed, and you're just going to look up the key location online and go, you gotta be fucking kidding me, that's where that key is? Jesus Christ. So collecting all the keys kind of sucks in most of the levels, and the thing is, your reward for collecting all the keys is garbage on most of these levels. Behind these doors, most of the time, is like a vehicle that you don't want to use, or a weapon that is not really that useful, especially if you've already completed the game and you have the shadow cannon available to you, or it'll be things like extra lives, which is completely fucking worthless. Only in like 2 of the levels is behind these doors something like an actual shortcut that can get you through the level faster than any of the other paths, which is cool, and I wish that's how they did all of these things. But the way it is, collecting the keys sucks, and your reward for collecting the keys sucks. Fortunately, you don't need to collect the keys to unlock expert mode, so in my opinion, you're best off just saying fuck it with collecting the keys in pretty much all of the levels. And that leaves us just with time attack to talk about in Shadow the Hedgehog, and you know what? I really like time attacking this game, because while it doesn't always do the traditional Sonic split pathing, it sometimes does, and in those levels I particularly like the game's level design. But for the levels that are more mission-focused and have just these split paths based on what mission you want to do, I still like doing those levels for time attack as well, primarily because a lot of the time the level design of Shadow the Hedgehog to accommodate the missions has just long pathways that you just run down for extended periods of time, filled with enemies and objectives for you to complete. But if you don't give a fuck about any of those objectives, then you can just run past everything, which actually ends up being really fun in this game because of how the movement works at high speed. When you're going really fast, you have to avoid all of the roadblocks and enemies and all the crap they shove on the road to not slow you down and not hit you, and so you have to weave in and out between all of these obstacles and enemies, and doing that with the movement in this game, where when you're moving really fast, your turn radius is increased, it just feels really cool. Like, unlike the Sonic Adventure games where you can very precisely turn and maneuver around everything, here it feels like you really have to steer your way through all the obstacles, precisely cutting a line through all these things trying to slow you down. And it's really fun and something that you only get playing Shadow the Hedgehog. And the Shadow Cannon works really well with the time attacking as well, since it can kill anything in one hit, so you can just be blazing through these levels at top speed, weaving through anything that gets in your way, and blasting past anything that's trying to stop you. It just feels so fun, I love it. And on top of that, the meter management of your Chaos abilities can also really incorporate into how you play these levels, because while Chaos Control is not very useful for actually completing the hero missions, obviously it is super beneficial for trying to time attack the game. And so while you're trying to fly through these levels as quickly as possible, you're also trying to kill the evil faction enemies as much as you can without slowing down using the Shadow Cannon, and getting as many Chaos Controls off as you can throughout the level. But also, it's not just about how many Chaos Controls you get, it's also about where you get them, because you can control exactly when your meter fills by just not killing enemies until you absolutely need to use Chaos Control. So for parts of the level that are particularly long and arduous and have lots of platforming that you have to slowly make your way through, you can try to time it so that way you fill your Chaos Control right before that sequence, so that way you can just fly past the entire thing. And also, another nice attribute of the Chaos Control is that if you're over a bottomless pit, it won't just end and drop you to your death, which means that it will actually carry you further if you can get it so that the Chaos Control empties over bottomless pits, allowing you to get even further through the level than you should be able to otherwise. And there's also even parts of levels that have like special chaos control paths built into them where you will skip entire parts of the level. For example, in this one level here, you have to do this sequence where you go onto these floating platforms, and it's kind of just an auto-scroller at this point, as you wait for the platforms to line up with other platforms so you can jump to the next one. And you spend a lot of time just sitting here waiting for the platforms to line up, not really doing very much, and this eats up a lot of time. But if you can make it so that you fill your chaos control right before you get to this sequence, then you can fly all the way to the top of this entire thing and skip waiting on those platforms completely, saving you a ton of time. And while Chaos Blast itself is not very useful for time attacking, it is still useful in the sense that you get infinite ammo and invincibility, and there are these certain things you can pick up hidden around some of the levels that will instantly fill one of your meters for you. So in a situation like this, you can grab this, fill your dark meter, and then use the invincibility to run across this hazardous floor instead of having to get into the slow-moving vehicle. This meter management stuff adds a nice layer of depth to the time attacking in Shadow the Hedgehog that, once again, you only get in this game. And of course you can time attack the normal levels just by doing the neutral mission where you just have to get to the end, but there's also Expert Mode, which now specifically designs all the levels to be about trying to get to the end, and time attacking these variants of the levels is even more fun than the normal variants, and they even force you to go on different paths because Expert Mode sometimes locks out the fastest path, forcing you to go through other paths that you normally would just skip over. Meaning you also miss out on some of the enemies on some of the paths, meaning you won't always be able to get Chaos Control in the same locations or as often when playing through Expert Mode. So for Time Attack, it really feels like a very different playthrough than the normal game. So you get 2 Time Attack playthroughs of this game that are fairly different from each other and both really fun. So that's everything I have to say about Shadow the Hedgehog as a game, and yeah, I really like this game quite a bit. I think Shadow the Hedgehog is really fun. In fact, to be honest, I like Shadow the Hedgehog more than both Sonic Adventure games. I love Sonic Adventure 1, I think that playing through it as Sonic is really fun, it has great movement, and it's really enjoyable to time attack. But overall, Sonic Adventure also has a lot of parts of the game that are really bad and very flawed. Shadow the Hedgehog is a game that I can enjoy not only the time attack experience, but I also like pretty much all the parts of the game. I like doing all of the missions, I don't mind doing a full playthrough and doing all the different endings. So overall, to me, Shadow the Hedgehog is a more well-rounded Sonic game than any of the ones that have come before. I enjoy pretty much all the gameplay this game has to offer. Though I don't like it as much as Sonic Heroes, that game's still the best in my opinion as far as these 3D adventure-style Sonic games go. But Shadow the Hedgehog, I would say, is a severely underrated game. I do not think it is nearly as bad as everybody says it is. I don't think it's nearly as flawed, nearly as broken, nearly as problematic. You cannot like it, you cannot like having to do all the multiple playthroughs, and you cannot like the mission-based focus of the game, and that's perfectly fine, I wouldn't blame you for that. But to be honest, I quite like Shadow the Hedgehog. I think it is generally a pretty good game.